Good morning. Thank you for joining us on NTV today. My name is Gladys Gachanja. Hoping you're having a fantastic Friday. It is the last Friday of the month, I believe. I wish you a good one. And right here on NTV today, as always, all matters current affairs. And speaking of which, just this past Wednesday, the 26th of June, the world marked the International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking. And those conversations have been going on in as far as the impact of the same in Kenya is concerned. And we shall be having a very candid conversation on the same in a moment. And of course, there's another day that was marked in this month, the Day of the African Child. That conversation still continues as it's also intertwined with that conversation about drug abuse, illicit trafficking, and we shall be covering both within this program. So make sure you do stay with us. But now let's start off with that conversation on drugs and substance abuse. And drug abuse and alcohol are among the top problems youth in Kenya are facing today. According to a survey conducted by the National Authority for Campaign Against Alcohol and Drug Abuse, NACADA, in 2018, children within a bracket of 13 to 15 years are the most vulnerable, and it's now a common concern shared across families. These issues have had a negative impact on Kenyan youth, affecting their livelihoods and making them vulnerable. NTV's Coast reporter Kevin Mutai has that story.
Vulnerable youth from as young as 13 years of age, especially from underprivileged families, have developed problems dealing with their social status within the community as a result of the immense disparity in income, access to quality education, as well as proper housing and sanitation. In Kisauni, for instance, most of the youth in the villages remain idle through the day for lack of employment and are forced to mill around in groups where they fall victim to peer pressure and depression.
Ukika kibarazani siku ya kwanza, siku ya pili, una kibarua wewe wakaa tu. Utafanya nini? Watu wataona ajiliwaze na nini? Kutumia miadarati.
Watu wako idle, unaamka tu, unakaa tu. Hakuna kazi, like people are talented, hakuna mali utashow talent yako.
Increased incidences of crime across the country is becoming a matter of grave concern. In Mombasa, for instance, the growing number of youth who are taking part in crime are under the influence of drugs and alcohol and are easy targets of recruitment to criminal gangs, all in the name of making quick money, oblivious of the consequences staring at them, which include death.
Wange deal na yule mtu ambaye anatengeneza kama ni chang'aa au anauza bangi wauzia hao watoto, hiyo ingekuwa imepungua. Lakini sasa wana deal na wale ambao wanatumia na yule ambaye ana supply ameachwa.
The society is also degraded by another more quiet menace, gambling, which is one of the most epidemics of greed amongst the youth who are in search of quick money. The addiction has seen them suffer losses and in some instances even end up committing suicide.
Unapata mtu ana bet, ana kazi, mwisho wa siku anaanza kuiba nyumbani. Ndio anakuwa mwizi kabisa.
Mtu ni mzazi, watoto hawajakula, wengine wanadaiwa school fees vile, akiangalia mpate ile ni 100 haitoshelezi, inabidi abet ili apate pesa nyingi kidogo atimizale mahitaji yake pale nyumbani.
The harsh standards of living have also opened a window for young girls to engage in commercial sex.
Mtu anaona hakuna kazi, afadhali aende huko Mtwapa, aende town kule Casablanca, afanye nini? Atumie mwili wake apate pesa.
Wazazi wetu hawatuelewi, wakikuona umenyoa hivi tayari wewe ni muhuni. Shule labda ukipata D ama E tayari wewe ni reject, na ameona amesacrifice sana, amechukua loan kuwekea pale, lakini kitu hawajaelewa kupita kupata A B si mwisho wa maisha, si kumaanisha wewe ndio unajua maisha zaidi ya wengine.
According to NACADA, of the 3,307 students interviewed in June 2018, at least 16.9% of primary school pupils are currently using at least one drug or substance of abuse, whereas 7.2% of primary school pupils are currently using prescription drugs. Kevin Mutai, NTV, Mombasa.
That report by Kevin Mutai, definitely a good place to start this conversation because it sheds light on some of the issues we're dealing with, and we cannot ignore that the dynamics of alcohol, drug and other substance abuse is changing with time. Now, to help us have this conversation on set is Anne Mathu, who is a recovering alcoholic, James Mwathi, also recovering alcoholic, and of course Margaret Muthi, who is a psychologist. Thank you for joining me. Now, just looking at those statistics, 13 to 15 years are the most vulnerable. They're either abusing drugs or alcohol or any other substance. Now, for you, Anne, your first sip of alcohol was at the age of 10.
Yes.
So meaning you're not surprised that we have these statistics,
I'm not surprised
right?
at all.
So how did you get around to tasting alcohol at such a tender age?
I got my first sip from my dad, and my dad had a drinking problem as well. So having, a drink from, a parent is someone you trust. And actually, most of these children will get their first drink, their first drug of choice from a person they trust. Either a family member, a teacher, a church leader, someone who has authority over their child. Mm-hmm. So for a father to give a child alcohol, then, I never saw anything wrong with that. If my dad is giving it to me, that means it's cool.
So what was the context? What would he tell you? Taste it because we
started with a small sip. So what he would do, he would take his Muratina. We start off with Muratina. So he would take actually a horn of Muratina, mm-hmm. and then he would pass it on to me and say, "Mom, sip." So I would sip and give it back to him, and then maybe he would give it to my other siblings. Mm-hmm. And that's how, we started. Mm-hmm. We didn't know that later on it was going to affect our life and mess us up. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, James, of course, your story is a little bit different, but the exposure to alcohol was also at an early age. Mm-hmm. What's your story?
Probably I fall under that category, the statistics. I started drinking in high school, even though there was alcohol around the home. When growing up, it didn't really affect me. But when I got into high school, that's when now, with all the newfound freedom, you feel like an adult, you want to do adult things, the peer pressure. So we started in high school as just one of those things that cheeky boys do.
Okay, yeah. So help me understand, was this because it was readily available, or because, at that age, as much as you've got some freedom, you still are curtailed by some parameters within the school? Yeah.
True.
So how did you get access to it?
Again, this is the age when most people are going through what we call identity development. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There is that also peer pressure is at its peak during this period. Mm-hmm. And there is that need to defy, probably to use that word, authority.
Yes.
And then the set rules. Alcohol has always been readily available and cheap. Yeah, in our country. So we would sneak every other weekend, and would changa 50 bob, another one 30 bob, and we'd go out and have a drink. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was in that context.
All right.
A bit of lax rules at the school, a bit of peer pressure, and that newfound freedom and wanting to experiment. Again, most people start with just experimenting. Yeah. So that experimentation, and you want to fit in with what your peers are doing, you want to look macho. Yeah.
Okay, I like the fact that you've talked about it's that age group where you're getting into puberty, trying to figure out where you stand and some bits of freedom, because according to even that survey done by NACADA, it raised a concern that secondary schools are not drug-free environments and other substances, and that bars and dens are located near schools now more than ever. Now, Margaret, when you think about some of these setups, are you surprised that we have younger and younger people that are struggling with one form of addiction or the other?
Thanks, Gladys, for having me on the show. One, it's sad. As a parent, I'll say it's very sad that we have the statistics that we are seeing. Number two, even as a psychologist, I'll say it is really sad. And why is it easier for the younger people to get more addicted than even older persons, for example. We can explain that from a psychology point of view. And what happens in the brain, the different parts of the brain, the part of the brain that is responsible for critical thinking, for looking at something and analyzing and assessing the risks involved and everything else, the prefrontal cortex of part of the brain, is the last to mature. That basically means, if I go to Anne's case and if I go to James's case, if they were still adolescents, that part of the brain gets to mature maximum point at about the age of 25. Coupled by the fact that there was the peer influence bit of it. The emotion part of the brain matures faster than the executive functioning part of the brain. And this explains why for adolescents, they are really, really pushed towards anything emotional. They are driven by the emotions as opposed to logic. And because they can't think in a logical way, the emotions take over. And that's why the peer influence is very, very high. And that could probably explain from a science point of view why it is easier now for the statistics that we are seeing the young people, because then they cannot think, they can't assess, they cannot analyze it, they cannot reason the way an adult above 25 would reason, because that part is not very well developed. And that also explains why it's much easier for them to get addicted, because they're emotion driven. And addiction is a response to a pleasurable feeling, because the pleasurable feeling reinforces the behavior. So the more pleasure they get, whether it is hanging around the peers, because that can give them the kick that they want and the high that they want, the more they will do what it is that they were doing because of the high, the pleasure that they're getting. And that is how addiction develops.
And addiction in this case is any kind, and we'll be touching on some of them even as we go along with the conversation. Now for you, Anne, that first sip of Muratina at the age of 10 opened up doors that you wish you never went through. But now that we're talking about high school, he sneaked out of school. You're the one who is teaching people how to get the alcohol into the school, right?
Yes.
Yeah, tell us more.
So actually, after my dad passed away, my dad passed away when I was in Form 1. And actually, his death was a hit on me, because my dad was, he's the one, he used to baby me a lot. He loved me a lot. And so I was left a very empty girl. I really don't know what to do with my life. And I just decided, why don't I continue with what my dad had started? You know, drinking. I wanted to be unique. I wanted to stand out. I wanted to do what everybody else was not doing. And having been in Gandu Girls, a sister school, I thought the only way that I could get attention, because I think I was really seeking for that attention, was to drink and smoke and introduce other girls to drinking and smoking, something that was not happening then. But then again, in 1978, we had a lot of girls coming from Nairobi after the first president passed on. So people relocated their children from the Nairobi schools to the rural schools because, you know, of the political climate that time. And so I got girls now who were coming in, who were smoking, and, you know, we got into a group now of smokers and drinkers. So actually that affected my education, and that's why I didn't pass very well in my exams. Yes.
Okay, now that does not stop there, and she'll tell us more about how this actually got even worse with time. But before I get to you, James, just listening to her story, it will tell you and point a finger to the fact that some of the younger people that are getting into addictions are not only pushed by the naivety you talk about, but they're also pushed by their backgrounds, where they're coming from. They're coming to fill a void. Margaret, speak on that.
Any addictive behavior, Gladys, is a symptom of something that is happening. There is an underlying cause. There's always something. I love what Anne is talking about. Attention, and that was it. There was that void. For anyone, whether it's smoking or whatever it is, even the adults, There's always, this is a symptom, it's a red flag to something. And that is why, in order to help this person, we need to find out what was the driving force. And even for schools, for example, the high schools, before we begin to punish, we need to find out what is it? What is the real reason pushing this person into this? Because then again, drinking is to the level, I mean, for an adolescent in Form 2, Form 3 to drink is not normal. It's not within the normal things that happen to an adolescent. If you're talking about being in clubs and societies, that is expected, but this is odd. Doing something for this adolescent who knows that it's against the school rules, and the risks would be, I'll get suspended, expelled, I'm going to get punishment, and all that. It's not what you would describe as a normal behavior. There's always the underlying cause. And the thing is, most often than not for an adolescent, the underlying cause will have a family background. Something that comes from the family or the environment, the childhood, some form of abuse, some form of neglect, some form of lack of attention. Could also be pressure to perform or some other force that is there. If these individuals, we need to help them, we need to find out what's the problem. Yes.
Very critical. Now, James, you finished high school, went on to Data University, and now the freedom was there for you to have and to do with it as you wished. This fueled your addiction, right?
True. I think campus is one of the most dangerous periods in a young person's life, especially if they have not gotten a proper grounding and a proper understanding of themselves in earlier years. Yeah, because like you rightly say, or you rightly put, with campus now comes everything. You have more money, you have more freedom. People consider you an adult, you are allowed to go into clubs legally. Yeah, so it's no longer something that you're hiding. You're away from your family for what, 4 months at a go? So you are an adult. Society considers you an adult. And with that, it's a time bomb. It becomes crazy. Now you have the freedom to do as you wish. You don't have to go for classes, you know. And like high school where you have to attend, now you choose what to do
and when to do it.
And when to do it. So campus was crazy. Campus was one ride, one hell of a ride. Yeah.
And when you speak about this hell of a ride, what exactly about it made it fuel your need to consume alcohol as much as you were growing into adulthood? And there's a bit of you that was waking up to the fact that if you mess up here, it will affect your future, but you still kept digging that hole.
You see, substance use disorder, which is the correct term nowadays, is a progressive disease. Yeah. By the time I'm getting into campus, I'm no longer where I was in high school in terms of the craving and the need to drink. Yeah. By the time I'm getting probably into my second year, apart from the having fun bit of it, you're starting to self-medicate against withdrawal symptoms. Yeah. So you're waking up with a hangover and you need a shot to steady your nerves. Yeah, you're foggy, your mind is foggy, and when you drink, it clears. So it's a combination of wanting to have fun, but also now you've started developing tolerance. You've started needing the drink to be okay. You've created a new normal for you, and the new normal is when you're high. Yeah. So while you recognize that there are negative effects, while you recognize that your grades have started falling down, it's not a matter of I will stop. It is a matter of I remember several exams I did when I was high. Yeah. Because I know if I go into the exam when sober, my hands are shaking, I can't remember things. So in the morning you wake up, have a drink, then go to the exam room. So you've created a new normal. You're normal when you're high. When you're not high, you're not normal. Yeah.
Okay, and Anne is smiling because she knows all too well. This went on from high school into your own career where you actually were moving from one dark hole to another dark hole. Speak on it.
Yeah, like Mwathi has said, it's progressive. right? You keep on moving from graduating from one stage to another. So actually in Kenya Poly, we used to get boom, just like I think they did in the university. And beer was equally cheap, and 500 was a lot of money. And then when I was a young girl, always wanted to be a star. I wanted to be a model. I wanted to be, something out of the ordinary, just like when I was in secondary school. So when I joined Kenya Polytechnic, I started going for dancing competitions and all that. I joined Miss Kenya Beauty Contest in 1982, came second. And now a lot of money, a lot of sponsors, a lot of freedom. And then, poop, again failed my exams. But since I was a government-sponsored student, I had to work for the government for 3 years. And then now, when I started working now, got into a relationship which later turned very toxic, where I got pregnant and the guy abandoned me, only 19, in a new town, in a new environment, a new mother, and actually now I started keeping alcohol in the house. I became a closet drinker. So drinking while on duty and all that. After 3 years, I fell out with the management of the school because I was a cateress. Luckily, I got a job with Pan-Afric Hotel, and then the same thing happened. I started drinking now very early in the morning, like Amati said. I used to have very, very, very severe withdrawals, so I had to actually clock in half an hour before the time so that I could go actually to the swimming pool bar and take a shot of at least 3-4 shots of vodka or brandy or whatever to stabilize. So I would actually start now keeping alcohol in the water system of the toilet. So the moment the alcohol level goes down, then I have to go to the toilet and actually take a swig or two to stabilize now again. So by this time, I was actually now drifting from the instrumental stage to the habitual stage. And then I was given a transfer. So they said, we are not going to sack you, but I'll give you a transfer to Kericho Tea Hotel. The Kericho Tea Hotel, the same thing happened. Worked there for 3 years, fell out with the management, and came back to Thika.
And
so
the issue was the same.
Sorry?
Alcohol was still at the root cause of this.
Yes.
Now, Margaret, I'm just listening to both James and Anne, and clearly there is a progressive tendency. You just don't wake up and become this person who needs alcohol other than want it. Are there signs that you as a person should have to know that it's time to call out for help, or even those around you should notice that something is off about this person?
There are signs, and just listening to both of them, they actually would pick the signs. They could tell. But Gladys, addiction is such that it takes over everything about you. Your life, you no longer have control over your own life. You become like a marionette, if we can say that. And addiction knows which string to pull in order for you to move from what direction to what direction. And listening to them, the signs are there. One, you know you're deep into addiction when whatever the drug of choice significantly impairs your daily functioning. Your work, you cannot work. I mean, Anne says, I even had to keep it in the toilet system. So that means she can't come in the morning and get straight into work, because now what James was describing as the new normal you is the one with alcohol certain amount levels into your system. So in order for me to engage the normal me, then I need to top it up to a certain level. And without that, I can't sit in class and sit an exam because my body is shaking. That already tells you you're becoming not just psychologically dependent, but you've also reached the point of physical dependence because your body is not functioning normally. You can't sit still, you can't be steady. You have all these withdrawal symptoms, you're sweating, the palpitations are very, very high. And immediately you take that shot, then you realize you sort of calm down. You stop being a nervous wreck, and now you're normal. You can't work. Your productivity goes down, whether you're a student or not. You cannot pay attention, you cannot concentrate. Under normal circumstances, you would hit so many hours at work, but now you can't without looking for the breaks in between to go and refill. the levels that you needed. And so the breaks, the bathroom breaks and the reasons to be out of office become more frequent than necessary. And the excuses of being late because you needed to satisfy your addiction in the morning. Probably you didn't have it and you needed to pass by a pub in the morning to look for it, or you didn't have the money and you needed to find money through hook or crook to do that. You need to leave work earlier because you're getting to the level where the levels are going down and you need to recharge. So we see the symptoms is, you know you're deep in it when it significantly impairs your normal functioning and your social relationships. When now you realize you're getting into trouble with friends, you're getting into trouble with colleagues, you're getting into trouble in school, you're getting into trouble with your family members, and you're no longer, if your mother, doing your motherly duties as you ought to be, because your time is spent in the addiction and not doing what you needed to be doing.
Okay, James, I'm sure you relate to what she's saying because the addiction also costed you something in your career, right?
True. Again, progression, I finished campus a bit late. The people who we enrolled with graduate probably 1.5 years before I do. Yeah, so there's that time lapse that's occasioned by the drink. But finally I graduate and I start getting jobs. But then again, like she puts it, you can't sustain a job. Yeah, because of the need to constantly keep on drinking. So you're coming in, either you're smelling of booze in the morning, you're untidy, you're not meeting up to your to your standards, to the set standards. There are always problems, yeah. And then you can't manage money. We had a common joke, a running joke, that whenever you're paid, you had to go and reduce the salary to manageable levels, yeah.
By drinking it.
By drinking it,
yeah.
you find that any time that you have some significant amount of money, it takes the drinking takes precedence over everything else. So you'll find that at the end, every end month, there's about 4 or 5 days you miss work. Yeah, because now it becomes a progression. You drink late into the night, so you're going home probably 3 a.m., 4 a.m. You oversleep, you wake up with a headache, you go back to the bar with the intention that I'll go to a lock, yeah, and then go to work, but then you can't get out of that pub. So after a while, that cycle, and you lose that job, you go back home, family problems, they're wondering what's the problem, yeah. There is a lot of lies because you have to keep on covering and trying to come up with excuses. You get another job, you pray and promise God, this time I will.
You'll keep it.
Yeah, and then same cycle. I lost about 3 to 4 good jobs, yeah, before I think my family thought now we need to intervene. Yeah.
Okay, and for you, Anne, you've been in some very low places where alcohol took you. Just a tidbit of the lowest you ever got before somebody came knocking to help you out of it.
Actually, I sold everything that I ever owned. It got to a point where my mom now took my children away from me because she saw the children were really suffering. I was an absent mother. And actually, my firstborn daughter started parenting her siblings when she was still a child herself. And my mom told me, enda ukunywe, ukitosheka na pombe utarudia watoto. But that never happened. So by then I was taking 2nd generation alcoholic drinks, and then I graduated now to Changa. Because now again, these 2nd generation alcoholic drinks without money, without a job, without a pay, then they became a little bit too expensive. So my brother, who was my protector and was my best friend and everything, told me, come, I introduce you to something which is cheaper and affordable. So we both went into Changa. And actually he told me, now, in fact, because you're not used to Changa, I'll get you a place just near the Changaden. And now that is helping me. So he got me a place. a shanty somewhere just opposite the Changaden. So he told me, wewe ukilewa una cross tu barabara. In the morning ukishindwa na kuamka, unapiga binja kwa dirisha, then they pass the alcohol, the changa through the window, because this time round my withdrawals were so bad that I could hardly stand. I had to drink, so my brother used to come with the changa in the morning and then feed me on that mattress, because nilikuwa nimeuza paka bed. So, and then later I also sold the mattress. So I'd sold the lock ya mlango. So nilikuwa nafunga mlango na mtungi ya maji. So he used to come and push the dog, give me the changa through a plastic bottle, and then give me a roaster cigarette for me to stabilize. So I used to go to get those fits, alcoholic fits. So I would get those fits for about 3, 4, 5 minutes, seconds, and then they're done. Then he told me, let's go and hustle. So actually just before I went to rehab is when my brother came. There was a police raid and he told me, unajua nini, wacha nikutibu. Kutibu now is giving me changa. Wacha nikutibu, upone, ustabilize now, tuende tuka hustle. So he told me there's a police raid, but he told me there's another base. Ya changa ilikuwa inaitwa base ya Sema. Mercy now, Sema. So when we went there, it was not changa. So, you know, it's haraka. So we were tukawekewa glass mbili haraka. So my brother told me, piga flash ukalewe mbele. So I took the glass and gulped it down. And then I realized, no, this one is not changa. I asked him, ini nini? It tasting fuel, petrol, nini? Kanimambia hii inaitwa jet mandege. Piga flash ukalewe mbele. So, your jet fuel tukakunywa, I went home. I'm telling you, it's like I felt like I was flying, like I was floating all the way until home. And then I blacked out until the following day. The following day is when I woke up vomiting water that was blood stained and all that. Then that's when a friend of mine who came actually on time to rescue me, a person I used to drink with who had come from rehab. And so he met my mom and said, I would like to know where Gacheri is. I would like to go and rescue her. So he's the one who came and actually, and don't think that after vomiting like that I stopped. I still went back to the Changaden and he actually found me seated on a stone. We used to sit on stones because hata hiyo viti ya changa tulikuwa tumeuza usiku. We used to steal and sell to another Changaden. So tukawekewa forms, hiyo tukauzia watu wa kupika vichwa ya ng'ombe kama kuni. So we used to sit on stones. So he found me seated on a stone and he told me there's a way out. He told me, you're still beautiful, very intelligent. You can make a difference in this country through campaigns. You have the courage. You can be a public speaker. And you know, he gave me so much hope. And this is the guy who turned my life around. They just told me, take me to that rehab you're talking about. And you know, the way he talked to me in a very calm way, in a very loving way, that's the guy who broke my denial, and that's the guy who walked with me to the rehab, and he has worked with me even up till today. And actually, I'll be 15 years sober in a month's time.
Well done. Well done. And definitely a story of hope that for those that are trying to get out of this dark hole, there is a hope, and there are those that are speaking of many years of being sober. Now, before I move on to James and when the light actually came through, let's cross over to Murang'a County, where my colleague Martin Moura is standing by to give us a tidbit of the same from that part of the country.
Yes, good morning, Gladys. As you have rightly said, we are in Murang'a County, and as you can see, I have a panel of two gentlemen here. One is very famous, and he has been on our television for some time for doing what he does, and for the good cause. Even the president recognized his efforts of fighting alcoholism. His name is none other than Sergeant Xavier. That is what most people call him here in Murang'a and in the country. And he is an AP officer. So I just want to talk to him, just so that he can tell me maybe how is the status of alcohol addiction in Murang'a. Karibu sana, Sergeant. Nataka tu niambie maybe what is the status of alcoholism here in Murang'a County.
Well, my name is Sergeant Moses Kimencho, End of State Commendation or HSC. I'm an addiction counselor National Police Service here in Murang'a County. Well, drug and substance abuse, it's a problem within our society and even in the community. And also, Murang'a County is one of them, which is in that society. Therefore, we have been trying to fight against drugs and substance abuse, but we have some challenges. It's a disease within us and also in the society. The challenge is that people have not known whether drugs or alcohol is a problem. People they see is associated with the demons. They try even to curse it, but it's a problem actually. And when we did a research with the United Nations, they have clarified that it is the most incurable disease in the community or in our country. Therefore, the effect that we normally get once when we approach somebody who is addicted, one is some are in denial. They don't want to agree that they have a problem. When you are trying to make some assessment to such a person so that you can refer that officer to a rehab or in a facility, you find you are having problem because even the family maybe they are not supporting. He has friends who are enablers. Enabler is someone who can maybe assist you to even to more drinking. And others they say that they sometimes quote in the Bible that Jesus changed wine into alcohol or white water into wine. Therefore, you find there are many challenges. Number two, other effects of alcoholism, it's liver diseases, liver cirrhosis, and so on and so forth. The other thing is that we don't have a retreat whereby these people who are addicted can come and maybe meet so that they can share their story, their journey in recovery. And also people, they call these people different names. In here in Central, we call them Moguruki or Wamunyota. Those names, they are not pressing. We can be calling them that these people are recovering and they are good people. Some are very professional. And therefore, if we can have a retreat whereby these people can be meeting for AA, Alcoholic Anonymous, so that they can come together and socialize.
Now, let me ask you, Sergeant. Yes, we have seen you rescue people, professionals from police officers. We have seen you rescue teachers and other high-ranking people. Yes. Maybe, what do you think is leading to this? Because people used to think that addicts are only people from poor backgrounds.
Well, Mr. Mohora, the leading cause to this problem is depression. People, they don't know. They associate depression with the alcoholism. Depression is a disease whereby you find yourself, you are in a mood disorder, depressive mood disorder, bipolar issues, whereby you are maniac, people who are violent. When they are at home, people normally say that this person is alcoholic. But once when you diagnose this person under through medication, you find this person is under depression or maniac or even bipolar issues. Now, to people who are in forces or in any high ranking, you find due to lack of counseling department in the organization, you will find so many organizations they don't have even a counselor. They say that they term a counselor as if it's just a person who is related to the work. But a counselor is someone who is helping these people to know their personality, self-concept, and also their mood of movement in that part of whereby someone can give out his story or give out his expression. And at the end of the day, you will find people who are sick. They have come to the society and they are productive in the society.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now,
that's why,
Sergeant, I'm being told that because of time, just let me give our friend here dakika tu moja, utuambie tu wewe ulijipataje kwa situation na ulisaidika vipi na unafanya nini kusaidia wenzako?
Kwanza kwa majina naitwa Zakaria Mutonya Kuria. I'm a recovering addict and a born again Christian. Nilijipata kwa hii shida, kwa hii ugonjwa, sababu hii ni ugonjwa watu wengi waitabui kama ugonjwa, lakini nimekuja kugundua ni ugonjwa ambao ni ugonjwa baya sana. It's incurable but manageable. Mimi nilijipata kwa hii shida nikiwa form 2. Wakati nilikuwa shule, nifika form 2. After kukua form 1, unajua maisha ya form 1 nakuwa kidogo gumu kidogo. Wakati niliingia form 2, ile group nilijipata nimeingia kwa group nyingine, yale vijana ambao at least hawakuwa watu wazuri.
Sasa after kugundua uko na hii shida ulifanya nini na unasaidia wenzako aje?
After kugundua niko na hii shida nilikuwa nimejaribu, nilikuwa nimefika kiwango ya kukua na...
Now, a very incisive conversation there, and very important one going on in Murang'a County. They will continue with the same, and as we continue with the same on this, and for the interests of time, and I'll go to you, James. There are very pertinent issues they brought up there. The fact that, first of all, that those who are dealing with addiction, the biggest issue is the denial that you have a problem. Secondly, the fact that addiction has a way of attracting other vices with it. It will come, like now alcohol, it will come with the cut, the miraa, and smoking and water view. And before you know it, you have a bigger problem than just the one that you started with. For you, how are you able to now come to a point where you let go of all this?
Okay, again, for any alcoholic, for any person with any substance use disorder, deep down they know they have a problem. It is not normal to drink in the morning. It is not normal to keep on losing jobs. It is not. So deep down, even when there is denial, they know there is a problem. The denial comes in due to very many factors. Stigma is big, yeah. The male ego or the ego, it's not easy to admit that I've failed in this. There is the perpetuated shame and guilt. Why do I have to keep on doing this? So you're always guilty. There is the shame. What are you doing to yourself and to your loved ones? Yeah, basically. So at the tail end, there is always that recognition that there is a problem. Personally, I think I just got to a point where I got tired. Yeah. And even when you get tired, you've fallen into a trap where you can't get yourself out. Everybody keeps on telling you, why don't you stop? It's not as easy as just stopping. Yeah. Probably due to time, we would have talked about the disease concept. Yeah. It's already a disease which very many people do not recognize. It's a brain disorder. So I got to a point where I was tired, and I think my family also realized maybe we can try something different. And without my knowledge, they sourced for a treatment center, and I went into a treatment center. Yeah. Now, very many things happen, and I had her talk about it. When you're in treatment, they try to figure out what's the root cause. They try to figure out what issues are you dealing with. They tear you down to build you up. Yeah. So I went through all that process, and there was the bit that in my mind I was thinking, let me try this, let me see if it works. Yeah. And in as much as most people think you have to relapse, I don't think you have to. No. I had Matthew say she'll be 15 years. I think I'm about 11 years clean without a relapse. So as long as the person recognizes that there is a problem, they address their root issues, there is a positive psychosocial support. Yeah, because again they say this person with a substance use disorder is only the identified patient. Yeah. Everything around him or her has to change. The family, the environment, the workplace, all those. So it's a multidisciplinary combined treatment for everyone around you. Yeah. So I think I was a bit lucky. I'm luckier than most that I had a very supportive family. Okay. And we worked through it, all of us. Yeah.
Okay, very encouraging, but most people do not have that kind of support. And that's why I would like Margaret to speak on the fact that even as we're speaking about denial for the addict, the support system also works with that denial. As it is even putting together this panel, trying to get a parent to come and speak about the struggles of their child, whether they've conquered it or they are still struggling with the same, was very difficult. The question was, what will other people think
about us as a family? There is such a thing as the family shame that binds us together. We don't want to wash our dirty linen in public. So as a family, we don't want to be seen to be struggling. Yet when one of the family members is struggling, the family is severely struggling. And this person who is struggling with an addiction is just the symptom bearer that the whole system and the whole family is actually sick and the family needs help. Most families, even when one of their own goes into rehab, the neighbors will never know. The extended family members will never know. And their closest friends will never know that one of us is in rehab. So they try and shield, and they think they're shielding and protecting themselves. And if only the family had acknowledged way before that Margaret and James or someone else is actually struggling, they would never get to the point where, the deepest of the hole where they got. But we will shield this person. We will, if it is a young person after Form 4 who was already struggling with drug issues in the country, they want to ship that young person and ship them and take them to study in the US, Canada, Australia, UK, wherever they want to do that. Why are they doing that? It's not because that person is going to get help there. It's because we do not want our image to be dented. We are Christians, remember. We hold positions at work, remember. And we hold positions in the society, and we have this class that we do not want people to see us differently. Healing and recovery for anyone struggling with whatever addiction starts with the family getting to the place of one of us has a problem. And this problem is not that individual's problem, it's a family problem. And let's get help. And that is why the most effective help incorporates the entire family going for therapy, because then you heal the entire system and the family becomes the support system.
Okay, and Anna, I'm sure this is very, I mean, it rings true for you, because what people forget is that the person who is an addict comes with a family. For example, you're a mother, your children were affected, you know, by your addiction. And there are many others out there who are left to fend for themselves or to wade through life without having gotten either counseling or some sort of direction. Everyone focuses now on the addict, and forgets that there are those that were touched one way or another by what you went through. Talk of the same.
Actually, even when a parent checks into treatment, before people were not including the children in therapy. So they would call the wife and call the parents and the brothers and sisters, but the children were left out. So actually these children suffer, like my children suffered a lot. My daughter now, she's in the US, and she had trust issues. She is a controller because she was used to controlling her siblings, you know, when she was small. So she wants to control everybody, even in her relationship. There's a time she couldn't stay in a relationship. She'll still want to control me. She's in America, I'm here. She's still telling me, Mom, you're not doing the right thing. So actually, I advised her to join ACOA. ACOA is a support group for adult children of alcoholics. And we have such a group here at Nairobi Hospital. So the children might not be drinking, but they were affected when they were children. And actually, you might find that most children of alcoholics don't drink, but they have issues. My son is a person who doesn't like socializing, fear of being known who he is and where he's coming from. So the moment you try to get closer and closer to him, he edges off. So my younger daughter, my last born daughter, has frustration tolerance is very low. Anything kidogo, she snaps. You know, you tell her you did this, you know, she gets so angry. And she needs to go for therapy for that, because that's something I've noticed. And actually, it's always good to identify the strengths in these children and nurture them. Because she was not good in school. One, I gave birth to her when I was in my last stages of addiction. So she was not very good in school. But I realized that she's very good in makeup, doing makeup and hairdressing and all. So I took her to a college to do that. And beadwork, she can do that. She can cook very well. So basically that's where now the direction I've taken with her. The rest have done well in university and all that. So there's also another support group for teenagers. It's called Altin, also at Nairobi Hospital. And also we have Al-Anon for family members. And then we have AA. AA is all over in most of the churches. Yes.
Yeah, and I like the fact she's now contextualized what Margaret was talking about. You think the problem is just for that one person, but all of you are being touched one way or another. Now, James, you also help others walk this talk, and it gets harder and harder when you deal with families that do not want to speak of it or to be identified with. What would be your clarion call to parents going forward, and even just society at large, if you're going to focus and tame this vice in society? What should be done?
Acceptance that there is just a disease like any other. I ask families and I ask people, if you had typhoid or malaria and you went to hospital for 2 weeks and you came out, would you tell your people that you're in Canada or you had gone for a retreat somewhere? It doesn't make sense. Yeah? So there's a lot of stigma, and I like the fact that we are talking more about it. Your station is doing a good job at it. Destigmatizing it and understanding that anybody is prone to this disease. Yeah, I would want to briefly touch on the relapse. Yeah? Yes. Because and it comes again with stigma, because some people have what we call co-occurring disorders. Yeah, so you have an addiction or a substance use disorder, and also another mental disorder, for example, depression. Yeah. Now, in our African, I don't know if it's African setting or Kenyan setting, we don't want to talk anything mental. Yeah, anything with mental disease, we think ni mwenda wazimu. So again, we hide them in the house. So you find we've been given this patient with what is identified as alcohol, but on further assessments, we realize that he has depression, and we have him see a psychiatrist and all that. But when they come out, the family does not believe in this depression thing.
Yeah.
So they stop medication. Once they stop medication, a concept called self-medication kicks in. They turn back to the alcohol, because alcohol lifts the depression.
Yes.
Yeah. So there is that aspect that as a society we need to start accepting that at times people will get sick, but there is help. People get well. NHIF has started accepting to pay for treatment. That is a big step.
Yes, it is.
Most insurances are still sluggish, but at least NHIF is taking a big step towards that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we have to close this conversation, so I'll get to you, Margaret. And James touches on the fact that we need to accept. We need to also realize that there's a very thin line between addiction and mental health, so that we all need to open up our eyes to just not the addiction, but the ripple effects of the same. Your clarion call as we close.
For me, what I want to tell the viewer this morning is echo what James has said. If you had diabetes, why do you invite us to go and see your patient, your relative, and keep telling us, my dad, my mom, my sister, everyone is admitted at this and this hospital. Please remember to pray for them. Why are we not doing the same for mental health? Because they are diseases. And why are we not doing the same for alcohol and other
addictions?
And it's the same thing. The second thing I want to tell the family is, if that individual will be well, it is to the extent of the support system that comes from the family. And it takes courage for the family to face it, to own it, to acknowledge, and to say, we are in this together. And their addiction is not what brings the family shame. What brings the family shame is the family's refusal to support one of their own who is sick, as opposed to the person struggling with addiction. Yes.
Very well said. Margaret Mbuthi, psychologist, James Mwathi, recovering alcoholic, and of course Anne Matthew, a recovering alcoholic. A very, very important conversation this morning, and this was done intentionally so that we keep in mind that we cannot bury our heads in the sand no longer. The dynamics of addictions and mental health are changing with time, and we need to wake up to the new realities. We take a short break on NTV Today. We'll be back with more conversations. Remember, the Day of the African Child was marked this month, and a lot of what we've talked about today also touches on these children and their rights, and we'll be talking about the same in the next hour. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with NTV today. My name is Gladys Gachanja. We continue with our current affairs conversations this morning, and one of them is intertwined with the Day of the African Child that was marked this month. And remember, the theme this year was Humanitarian Action in Africa, Children's Rights First. Now, this is a conversation that has been very rife on social media and, of course, different forums where stakeholders have been talking about the same. And, of course, the rights of children go beyond just humanitarian. There are other issues that they face day to day, and my panel is already in studio to have this conversation with us. But before we get to it, there's one that seems not to go away, and I'm talking about FGM, and Deputy President William Ruto insists that the government will not tolerate those engaging in female genital mutilation, asking all state agencies to step up the war on those practicing it. Now, speaking at his official residence in Karen, Ruto said FGM and early marriages undermined the health, education, and the social economic development of girls and women.
Deputy President William Ruto spoke during the signing ceremony for a partnership between the United Nations Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency, UNFPA, and the Kenyan government to support efforts in eradicating female genital mutilation in the country. Kenya has made progress in accelerating the abandonment of the practice. The national prevalence of FGM in Kenya stands at 21% compared to 27% in 2009 and 32% in 2003. But in spite of the steady decline nationally, the prevalence still remains high in some communities.
FGM and early child marriages undermine the health, the education, and the socio-economic development of our girls and women. And in fact, FGM, simply put, is violence against women. And we must stop it by all means.
FGM has been against the law in Kenya since 2011, but the outdated practice still continues. And FGM Initiative is a collaboration of UNFPA Kenya Anti-FGM Board and Ushanga Initiative.
Ending FGM using our culture of working with beads with our women that will empower them financially, provide money for them to take their kids to school.
The initiative comes after President Uhuru Kenyatta pledged to see an end to the practice by the end of his time in power in 2022. He spoke at the Women Deliver conference in Vancouver, Canada. Rose Ongoi, NTV.
FGM, early marriages, definitely vices that keep taking away from the rights of children over and over again. And it is actually encouraging to see the government take full control of this matter and see the end to the same. Well, the conversation continues right here in studio with me, Pascal Masila Mailu, who is the Director of Programs and Quality at the SOS Children's Villages in Kenya, and Simon Malenya, who is a Child Protection and Safeguarding Officer at the Mukuru Promotion Center. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. I'll start with you, Pascal. Just listening to what the Deputy President has put across as what the government is promising to do to end FGM, we know that this has been something that has been at the core of our culture, and it has kept on taking away from the children because, as he said, it takes away from their rights to good health, education, and the list goes on and on and on. What is your stance hearing the government come in this way?
Thank you, Gladys. I think as SOS and as somebody who has been in the child protection business for many decades, is a very welcome move by the government. And as you rightly put it, FGM is classified as one of the harmful cultural practices that human rights and child rights activists are trying to eradicate. And it is so deeply embedded in most of our traditional customary cultures as a rite of passage for girls. And the unfortunate thing is that as a rite of passage, it is interpreted to mean that the girl has transitioned from childhood to adulthood, and hence they are ripe for marriage and childbearing. And statistics, research has shown that there are devastating effects in terms of sexual reproductive health rights, because these are very young girls who get married, start engaging in sexual activities when they are very young. Their bodies are not physiologically prepared. They're supposed to be in school because, I mean, most of them are under 18.
Yes.
So, in a nutshell, is one of those harmful cultural practices that ends up alienating the children from their rights, the right to education, the right to life and survival. So many of them actually pass away in the course of childbearing. The right to quality health. And eventually, I think it also dents the long-term investments that the government puts in health and education.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And just to add, as SOS, one of the things that we do is to try and prevent such harmful cultural practices through community mobilization, awareness creation, and making sure that the laws that are there are fully enforced. Because what the Deputy President is saying, it does not come in a vacuum.
Yes.
We have the laws. We have the Children's Act of 2001 that explicitly prohibits FGM as a practice. We also have the Prohibition of FGM Act. We also have national structures that have been put in place. We have the Anti-FGM Board. So if the government can also follow up on the words with the resources,
yes,
commit enough resources to strengthen the Anti-FGM Board, put a lot of resources in terms of child protection, and also try to advocate with the gatekeepers in these communities, because changing cultural perceptions and practices takes time. And people who defy these laws sometimes are people who are in authority. We've seen in some areas village elders, chiefs, community leaders who actually really believe in these harmful practices. So you need to really put up the evidence up there, advocate, and make sure that the law is enforced fully.
Okay, now Simon, for you, you work with this, you work with the setups within the slum areas, and of course with some of the challenges that comes with growing up in such a setup. These girls are already vulnerable to a point where they are unable to say no to some of these cultural harmful practices, right?
That's true. And perhaps if I just go back to what Pascal was saying, in the informal settlements, perhaps in the urban centers, we might not have these FGM issues being practiced really. But back in the villages, especially in the communities that practice them, as Pascal puts it, the prevalence is actually high. It could even be higher than what we have seen in the research and the data being presented. And as he puts it, the issue is with the government officials. The fight against FGM is not about the law. It goes beyond the law. It's about the attitudes of the people. I know these are cultural practices, cultures that have been embedded within the people. And some of the people who propagate some of these vices are actually leaders, especially the political leaders. So you go to some of these villages, if you go to West Pokot, you go to Masai land here in Kajiado and Narok, you go to Northeastern, where this practice is being done, you realize that even for those civil society organizations that engage in the advocacy against FGM, you will find that there is a very little support from the political leaders and even the government officials. So what they do, like the agencies that have been put up by the law, like the FGM board, for instance, they have got very little presence within the communities that practice FGM. So a lot needs to be done in terms of changing the attitudes of the people. And I think most of the organizations that work within those marginalized areas have done a lot. But coming back to the informal settlements, especially the urban informal settlements, the vulnerabilities are extremely high, especially for the girls. And here the issues of child marriages are the ones that are very high, and child pregnancies. Children as young as 13 or 12 years are already engaging in sexual activities, and some are getting pregnant within the so-called slum areas, the informal settlement setup. And this has been attributed mainly to hard economical times, poverty within the slum areas, where most of these children, some don't even have parents, or if they have parents who have abrogated their responsibilities as parents as such. So they have to fend for themselves. They have to get money to go to school. They have to get money to eat. And that one makes them extremely vulnerable, especially to the people who might be preying on those young girls. So it's an issue that needs a lot of stakeholders coming together to address those issues, to be able to support our children within the informal settlement areas and the villages back in the communities.
Okay. Now, Pascal, as you said, you've worked with children and the rights of the same, trying to advocate for them and giving them a safe haven where they should be able to flourish with all their rights intact. Now, what Simon is touching on has changed the dynamics of how these children end up in your premises. And with time, the issues are getting different, or the dynamics are changing. What are some of those that you have seen that make these children vulnerable?
Thank you, Gladys. Maybe I'll start with some of the programs that you run in SOS so that we can relate them to this crisis, because I actually consider it a crisis. So at SOS, we have 5 children's villages in 5 locations or counties. That is Nairobi, Mombasa, Eldoret, Kisumu, and Meru. And these are family-like homes where we provide alternative parental love and care to children who have lost parental care because of either natural disasters or violence in the family, and so on and so forth. So FGM and related harmful cultural practices are very relevant in our work, because childhood in Kenya, and by extension in Africa, is almost becoming a crisis. It is becoming very difficult for children to survive and thrive within our villages and communities. And so you see violent acts like FGM, sexual abuse, gross physical abuse, predispose children to loss of parental care. And you find that a lot of children who have been violated don't have safe spaces to run to. So at SOS, we provide that family-like model where children who are either escaping FGM because they don't want to go through the cut, or who have actually undergone the cut and who are looking for ways of sustaining their education and development, can actually come and receive a very loving home. We also provide them with education and alternative parent, healthcare, and we support them in terms of life skills until they attain the age of majority. And if they are still in school or college, we still make sure that by the time they are transitioning from SOS, they're actually well-adjusted young people who can not only develop but contribute to the society.
Okay.
And then the other major program we have is prevention. We have a family strengthening program that looks at the communities and families outside the villages that we have. So we work in communities in terms of trying to understand the vulnerabilities of children, trying to understand what kinds of violations they undergo. Again, sexual violation, a lot of domestic violence, a lot of hardships in terms of deprivation of education, healthcare. And so we try to strengthen the families and communities to make them resilient in terms of economic empowerment and livelihoods, so that we have strong families that can provide quality childcare to children without letting them fall through the cracks and come to institutions like SOS. And then lastly, we also have a major advocacy program that tries to advocate for legislative and policy reforms at the national level, so that we actually have laws and policies that back the work that we do. Because we can do so much as NGOs, but if the policies and laws have gaps or they are not there, it will be very difficult for us to have a firm foundation to work from. So in a nutshell, that is what we do at SOS. And so some of the children that we take care of are actually survivors of FGM, and others are children who are escaping such harmful cultural practices.
Okay.
Yes.
And as we still speak about sexual gender-based violence, which is what is being meted on these young ones because they're the most vulnerable and they're supposed to be following instructions from these adults, when you think about the informal settlements, Simon, there is a lot of children that are facing this day to day. What happens and what do you do from your end to ensure that you protect themselves or protect them from even those that are supposed to be protecting them, their guardians, their parents, and at times their teachers?
Thank you, Gladys. We have the preventive programs and the protective programs. The main preventive programs that we have within the informal settlement area, especially for Mukuru, is the education program. you realize for the larger Mukuru area, especially from Mukuru Kayava, Mukuru Kwenjenga, Mukuru Karuben, Fuata Nyayo, and all other slums within the Mukuru area, the government does not have formal institutions, educational institutions. They are supported by the church, and this is the Mukuru Promotion Center. So the primary schools are there, and we have about 5,000 children who are going through these primary schools. And one of the things is that we support these children to go through this free education, giving them lunch, and sometimes also supporting them with the uniforms to ensure that they are actually in school. Remember, education is one of the bigger tenets within the rights of the child. And it says we need quality education.
Yeah.
But again, if you have about 5,000 children going to schools within Mukuru, and we have only 4 institutions, we can only do much. So you have an institution like have a population of over 1,000 children in one institution, it becomes problematic. But within those institutions that we have, as small as they may be, we have programs that support these children, especially in terms of life skills, as Pascal had put it, supporting these children to learn the ideals of life and how life is outside school and within school. How to live within the community and support each other to be able to prevent and protect themselves from harmful practices, especially the child marriages, child pregnancies, and the drug addiction within the informal settlements.
Yes.
And also, right now we also have the issues of criminal gangs coming up, and especially targeting the young ones, and some even radicalizing these youths to join some gangs that are not very good within the country. So we have those programs to educate children, to see them that at least they transition from primary school and they go to secondary institutions. And if we don't have, if they may not transition to secondary education, we have the vocational, technical and vocational training institutions to be able to support these children who cannot transition to secondary school. To train them with the vocational skills like plumbing and masonry, tailoring and garment making, hairdressing, computer training, art and design, to give them a niche within the market area where they can come up with those entrepreneurial skills and then be able to move into society and start a living on their own. And the majority of this, and we target, are child mothers actually. These are children within the age of 14 and 17 who happen to be mothers. And those even the young boys who did not transition to secondary school, or even those who have been rehabilitated from the drug abuse and the criminal gangs. So they're coming back to learn entrepreneurial skills to be able to support themselves and come out of that problem of that affect them within the informal settlements. The other area is in terms of the healthcare. Healthcare is a constitutional right to everybody within this country. But you realize that government institutions are minimum. So the promotion center has set up healthcare within this informal settlements within Mukuru that are extremely affordable and accessible to the local mwananchi. So that these people, once they have these issues, especially those one who have been abused, children who have been abused, can be able to be attended to within these institutions without pay. Because the problem has been that you have children who have been abused, those who have been defiled, those who have been physically abused, and even those who have been emotionally abused. Because we have social workers and counselors within those institutions that attend to their problems and be able to support them. But of course, the main problem that we face is in terms of the available facilities. The numbers are large. Mukuru slums, the larger Mukuru slum has a population of about 500,000 people within that small area. So it becomes a real trouble to be able to support them, but we are managing and supporting the children to be able to fulfill their potential.
Okay, now Pascal, let's talk about capacity building, because as much as you will protect the child from the world, you need to also make sure they are in a position to make the right choices.
Yes.
As he touched on it, and we had an earlier conversation about addiction of whatever kind. These things are readily available from the alcohol and the drugs themselves, and statistics show that the most vulnerable are the 13 to 15 years of age, and it keeps going that way, and that age group gets younger and younger.
Yes.
What is being done, or what have you been able to do, or do you think should be done to ensure that these children know how to protect themselves from themselves, if you know what I mean?
Thank you, Gladys. I think a lot has been done, but we still have a lot of room for improvement. Because, again, I like referring to the policy and legislative frameworks, because that is what we draw from. And Kenya has national guidelines on child participation. And as an organization, SOS, we also have our own guidelines that we use to enable children to participate. And for a child to participate in terms of protecting themselves from violations, including FGM, drug abuse, and so on and so forth, they need to be empowered. And that's where capacity building comes in. So we undertake a lot of capacity building for caregivers, parents. We also do a lot of capacity building for government officers, specifically children's officers. And we also do a lot of capacity building for the children and youth. Because if the children and youth do not have appropriate information on their rights, on their responsibilities, it will be very difficult for the adult population to protect them.
Yeah.
So some of the things that we do for children, even at the youngest ages, because sometimes you imagine that even young children cannot understand things. They actually understand depending on the language that you use. So we have approaches that apply age-appropriate language that we disseminate to children in schools and other community institutions to make sure that very young children know what amounts to an abuse, and they can actually report to the next available adult or caregiver. And that after they report, they know that action will be taken to address their plight. So we do a lot of capacity building for children in terms of awareness creation for them to report and follow up. We also do a lot of capacity building for caregivers and parents, because a lot of adults also commit these violations because of ignorance. They do not know that spanking a child under Kenya's Children's Act is actually prohibited. Some of our teachers in learning institutions don't know that corporal punishment is against the law. A lot of us as adults don't understand the implications of abusing drugs in front of our children within the confines of our houses. So you find a lot of children getting into these habits because either they are so exposed to them. We are busy taking whiskeys and cigarettes and other drugs in our sitting rooms, and the children are watching. And we still have this culture of sending children for cigarettes and everything. And once in a while, a child decides to puff and see how it tastes.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of capacity building. And then we also work a lot with government structures. The government has decentralized child protection, again, through the National Council for Children's Services. So across all the counties, we have what we call area advisory councils for children that bring together civil society organizations like us, government departments, and we sit down and identify problems affecting children within the counties and sub-counties up to the locational levels, and we make sure that we come up with interventions that involve the children, the government officers, the communities. So it's a multi-pronged approach.
Okay, now...
But we cannot do a lot without the children and youth. They have to be part of the solution.
And I love that you put it that way, Simon. This brings me to this question. There are, for example, rehabilitation centers across the country, whether private or public, that cater for the adults.
Yes.
These children that are already exposed when they're very young are always, most often than not, ignored and thought to outgrow some of these habits when they pick up, or they pick up when they're younger.
Yes.
What is being done to ensure that we do not leave the children behind? Because this same child is the adult we'll be talking about tomorrow.
That is very true. And the problem could even be bigger than that.
Yeah.
the report that came out from NACADA, saying that even those children who abuse drugs, that could be as young as 4 years old. A 4-year-old is someone who is in preschool, or even some in the villages and informal settlements have not even started schooling at that particular age, but they're the ones who are abusing drugs. And you see, it's about the peer mentality within that community, because we have a number of children, especially what we used to call the street children, who have used these dogs for quite a while, and they have friends within that particular setup. So the level of addiction is high among these children within that setup. But again, our policies do not support that. What we have are adults being rehabilitated. Yeah. But we have forgotten these children that need a lot of support from us. We call them all manner of names. But we need, as institutions, and especially from the government side, to come up with these institutions that could be able to support these children, because the policy is there for the government, and the guidelines have been given to be able to support these children, remove them from the street, remove them from the addiction centers and cocoons, and place them in some institutions that could be able to support them psychosocially, and even some of them to go through educational system. But we do not have that. And then when these children hit the age of 12 and they become teenagers, they join gangs. They become the real addicts now. Now, to rehabilitate them takes a lot of time. And of course, the rehabilitation takes a lot of resources as well. Yes. So, as a matter of fact, as Pascal puts it, the children's services have been decentralized. But again, what the government has done is to decentralize personnel. But they have not decentralized the funding and the support to be able to actualize their programs. So you will get children officers in the sub-counties, in the counties, who are there, but they do not have resources to be able to support their programs that they have. And the government has one of the best programs, I will say, in East and Central Africa, one of the best programs in child protection. But the resources are not given to these offices. Pascal will tell you that the area advisory councils that he's talking about, most of these children officers cannot afford to hold them. Because if you hold them, you will need a glass of water, for instance. Yeah. You will need an area that has to be paid for. If we are holding a meeting for this area advisory councils, they do not have budgets for that. And therefore, if you do not have the civil society organizations that come in to support, most of these programs fail, and they do not reach that particular child. So they will come up, and child participation, as he says, is one of the major tenets of child protection. So they do not have those programs that will bring children on board, transport a child from whatever area they are to come and participate in the decision-making, learn what concerns them in their particular area, what are the incidences, what are the factors that contribute to a child not being protected within their particular area. And therefore, once we get these resources, especially to the government, it is going to be extremely important to collaborate between the state and the non-state actors in supporting these children to fall into that vice.
Okay, Pascal, even as we wind up this conversation, I think I cannot let you go without us touching on something that makes the children very vulnerable, and especially the girl child. We've had over and over again sanitary towels for sex. This is another area that does not seem to get the support in resources and other ways to ensure that we do not leave any girl behind in whatever way when it comes to this monthly occurrence. What have you been able to do in your capacity, and what do you believe should be done to ensure that we do not have this conversation again?
Thank you, Gladys. Actually, research has shown that the lack of sanitary towels has very adverse effects in terms of enrollment of girls to learning institutions, attendance of classes, and performance. Three major outcomes in education. And like Simon puts it, the right to health is enshrined in our Bill of Rights in the Constitution of Kenya. And the provision of sanitary towels is a critical component of the right to health, especially for girls. And what the government needs to do, because health is a devolved function in the constitution again. And I know there's been a lot of challenges in terms of devolving the resources for health to the counties. But what we've been able to do in a few counties is to advocate and to make sure that the governors and the county governments appreciate the challenge that the girls have in terms of school enrollment, attendance, and performance, just because of lack of sanitary towels. And so we're advocating for the governments to provide for budgetary allocation in their health budgets, so that the provision of sanitary towels to girls in primary and secondary schools is actually something that is recurrent, and is not something that is done ad hoc by a sympathetic NGO or individual, or maybe seasonally by the government. It is a fundamental right that's supposed to be provided for by the government.
Yes.
And I don't think we need to be negotiating this.
Yeah.
And it's not the responsibility of NGOs, it's actually the government as the primary duty bearer. As NGOs, we are just there to complement what the government does, and that's why as SOS in our program areas, we also support a lot of education programs, and where resources allow, we also provide sanitary towels to make sure that girls can actually attend school and perform well.
Okay.
It's a key barrier.
Yes, it is. Now, Simon, as we close, definitely this is a reality in the informal settlements. I mean, if you cannot even have enough for food, sanitary towels is a luxury. What is being done and what can be done to ensure that, as Pascal is saying, that this fundamental right is given to our girls?
Thank you, Gladys. There is a time I remember the former First Lady, the late Mama Lucy. She used to advocate for this issue, and there's a time the government actually zero-rated VAT on sanitary towels.
Yeah.
But that's a long time ago. What has happened? Today, I understand a pack of sanitary towels that a child will want to use, maybe for in 1 month, will go to as much as 80 shillings, depending on where you are.
Yes.
Now, 80 shillings, that's almost $1. In this country, 80 shillings is the amount of money, especially in the informal settlement, that the families live on in a day. So you either buy food for your 5 children within the informal settlement, or go buy a pack of sanitary towels. So which one will take precedence? Definitely food. And that is the problem we have in this country. So the government needs to come up with the proactive measures that will be able to support even the non-state actors, the NGOs that come in to support. Their financial, their budgets are constrained. So we need, for instance, the government to come up with some policy guidelines on how they're going to tax these sanitary towels, so that it becomes extremely affordable, so that even the NGOs that need to support could be within their budget to be able to support. Because if you have 800 girls in one primary school and they need 100 shillings every month, that is 80,000 shillings every month. It might not be possible for, it's not sustainable for the NGOs to be able to support that.
Yeah.
But if the government looked into the issue and perhaps said that we are going to completely zero rate and subsidize the cost of sanitary towels, is going to work. But again, as Pascal was putting it, health was devolved. But there's no single county government that handles this issue, especially the counties within the marginalized areas where these children face some of these problems. And when it comes to issues of enrollment, attendance, and performance within the schools, at that particular time, there's almost no attendance when it comes to girls, because they can't come to school. If you come from the informal settlements, they will hide. They will hide, because you don't have that money, first of all, to buy those sanitary towels. There is no neighbor that you can go borrow it from, and you can't go to school. So it becomes even a psychological problem that affects some of these girls, and they end up dropping out of school.
And some of them end up in commercial sex work because
exactly.
they need to survive.
Yes.
And some of them, if you get someone, an adult, for example, a 30-year-old man who has a border rider in this country, who has 100 shillings to give you, and you're just a 15-year-old girl, the level of vulnerability goes up. And those children are likely to fall into these situations of abuse.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, a very good conversation here, and I think we cannot emphasize enough how it is important to safeguard the rights of children. Most often than not, they're seen as extensions of their adults, but they actually are human beings who have their own rights, and these should be safeguarded. Pascal Masila Mailu, Director of Programs and Quality, SOS Children's Villages, Kenya; Simon Malenya, Child Protection and Safeguarding Officer at Mukuru Promotion Center. Gentlemen, thank you. And it's time to shift gears to the sporting world. Of course, Kenya is beaming with pride now that we won our game yesterday at AFCON. Sean Cadavillas, Ida Waringa, you are ready to give us some of the meat that came out of the games yesterday, and of course from that one game that kept Kenyans up very late into the night.
Thank you very much, Gladys, and a lot of sleepy heads this morning and probably one or two sore heads as well. What a game it was yesterday, Kenya having to come from behind to eventually win 3-2 against Tanzania. Ida Waringa, of course, with myself, Sean Carter-Villis. Ida, what a night it was.
What a night, Sean. Edge of your seat kind of stuff. 3-2 to Kenya, getting their first win in an AFCON in 15 years for the first time since 2004. What did you think about it?
I must admit, it really tested my allegiance to Kenya, because a lot of the talk on social media was, oh, you guys were trashing the boys, you guys were not patriotic. You know, there was a lot of talk about that. In the end, justified the criticism as well, because one or two of the goals were, you know, never really should have been goals, huh?
Exactly that. So our defense is lacking. Our goalkeeping department has a bit of work to do. But overall, I think what we witnessed yesterday was the boys giving a fight. And that's all we ever really wanted in the first place. From the first game against Algeria, no fight. A lot of people asking, can we just see the guys put up a fight and never give up attitude? So I do believe we have a package on that, Sean.
Yeah, so in the end, the hero for Kenya and man of the match, Michael Olunga, he scored a brace. Here's our report.
There's a through ball, it's onside as well. Opportunity.
Some of the goals, Sean, we will be sure to have the story in just a bit. But that first goal by Tanzania, what did you make of it? Was it a defensive lap on our end or?
Definitely a defensive lap.
Yeah.
And we saw also with the second goal as well, with the goalkeeping as well. And there were talks, a lot of chatter beforehand about our goalkeeping selection.
Exactly.
You know, even our defenders as well. Did we take our best squad? In the end, we were saying that Minye would have to answer the questions when he comes back to Kenya.
Yeah.
And also the talk is, yeah, fair enough. Even a draw, I think a draw was not going to be good enough, and a result had to be had against Tanzania, because I was even saying on social media, should we lose to Tanzania of all people, our neighbors, and particularly what went on in the 24 hours beforehand with an MP, of course, those unfortunate comments against Tanzanians living in Kenya. You know, in the end, we had to win against Tanzania. Here's our report. Michael Olunga scored twice as Algeria, and Mane, of course, a Champions League winner with Liverpool. So Liverpool Champions League winners against, of course, the Premier League champions.
City.
You know, so it was a big game. But in the end, both players were relatively quiet in that game.
Quite a game between Senegal and Algeria there. But in terms of the group, Senegal and Kenya currently on the same points, but difference in goals. And that's what puts Senegal currently above Kenya. But going back to the Kenyan game for just 1 minute, there was lots of talk before the game. A lot of people saying, look, Calabar should have started in the previous game. However, we didn't really see too much from him, despite a lot of hype about the player in the game yesterday against Tanzania. But amazing performance from Michael Olunga. 2 goals in that one game versus Tanzania. Dare I say, many more goals than Mo Salah and Sadio Mane put together in the AFCON tournament so far. But going back to Senegal versus Algeria, I'm informed we do have that table, Sean, so let's have a look at that. Just exactly what we were saying earlier.
Yeah, so in the end, you look now, Algeria, of course, they've qualified for the last 16. Senegal and Kenya, of course, they play next. That is a 6-pointer, literally,
right,
in terms of who's going to go through. And then, of course, we got the third place, you know, a number of teams could qualify from third place. So that's going to be crucial as well. Tanzania on their way home. But again, when you look at Senegal, do they look beatable?
I think Senegal looked beatable, and Algeria showed us that yesterday. You know, the simple fact of it is, other than very, very dubious officiating, as we saw by the Zambian referee, who, by the way, had been banned by CAF for previous dubious officiating in a Champions League match. Story for another day. That was a clear penalty to Sadio Mane. Didn't come through. Very, very composed, very cool, calm and relaxed. That game should have ended 1-1, but Algeria clearly very fluid, very dangerous, and we did see very physical play. 54 fouls. Their frustrations versus Algeria on Kenya. So we might be the hapless boys for Senegal, but I do think we can still put up a fight. Sean, we watched ourselves play against Ghana in the return leg here at home, and we clearly saw that the boys can do something. But I do think we'll definitely need to up our defense versus the Teranga Lions, and we'll really need to try and get them on the counter.
What we need is the boys to play like last night, in terms of don't have the stage fright, don't be afraid, make sure you come out, you know, don't fear these guys.
Exactly,
you know? The other thing is as well, we got to, you know, not criticize the boys too much. When you look at the standard of the Kenyan Premier League, and I've been saying this to a number of people, you look at the standard of our facilities, you know, we've been getting away with it for too long.
Right.
You know, when you look at athletics, our natural abilities able to mask the shortcomings behind. You look at rugby sevens, it's the natural abilities. We're naturally built for rugby sevens, you know.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got the strength and conditioning and all that. But it's masking the problems we've got. Football or soccer is very scientific. And that's where our shortcomings have come, that you can't expect these boys to suddenly raise the level from the bumpy pitches and the lack of training facilities we've got here and the scientific know-how and research,
yes,
and
Sean,
then jump right to the top of continental football.
Just a very quick one. There was another game yesterday, finishing up Group B between Madagascar and Burundi. Both teams taking part in their first AFCON. However, I will say this, with Madagascar, you wouldn't really know. An amazing game from the Malagasy, whose name...
went to penalties, and in the end, Gabriel Jesus was the hero for Brazil. Here's our roundup.
Brazil 2019 Copa America is here from 14th.
All right, so just a quick note, it is Argentina against Venezuela tonight in that second quarterfinal, and the winner of that, it could be an Argentina-Brazil semi-final.
Who knows? It might be just about time that Messi gets some silverware with Argentina. Still quite a bit to go, but things not looking too bad for Argentina. Just a quick one, and back to the Africa Cup of Nations. Tunisia will be facing off against Mali in the first game today. Now, Mali had a player who was actually banned or dismissed from camp for gross indiscipline. Niane actually slapped his captain, Sean. So he is one of 5 players who so far have been expelled from their teams for specific reasons. Ama Warda being the other player from Egyptian squad who was actually dismissed from the team and the camp for sexual misconduct. That's about it, Sean. To you.
Incredible stuff. Don't forget the latest on the Africa Cup of Nations right here on NTV, and don't forget much more on radio as well. Sportsline on between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. with myself. But now it's thank you very much, Ida Waringa, and myself, Sean Carter-Villis. It's back to you, Gladys.
Thank you, guys. Definitely looking forward to Monday. I know it's an uphill task, but hey, we still have to have faith in our boys. Well, that has been NTV Today. NTV Sasa starts right after this. Make sure you stay with NTV. My name is Gladys Gachanja.